All right, let's break down a message that uses a really ancient story to explain a very personal, modern journey of faith. The title itself tells you where we're headed, and now I see.
So this one line, it's really the heart of the whole thing. It's this simple, powerful, undeniable answer from a man whose entire life has just been turned upside down, and he's saying it to a bunch of people who just don't believe him.
So that's the big question we're digging into, right? How does a statement from 2,000 years ago, this defiant declaration of personal experience, become the perfect way for a modern leader to explain his own spiritual conviction? Let's dive in and see how it all connects.
So where does this quote even come from? Well, it's from a pretty famous story in the Bible, in the 9th chapter of John. It all starts when Jesus and his disciples come across a man who'd been blind his entire life.
And this is where it gets really interesting. You see the contrast right away. The disciples, they get all caught up in these big, complicated religious questions. Why is he blind? Who sinned, him or his parents? But Jesus, he just sidesteps that whole debate. Instead, he does something really simple, almost earthy.
The actual process is incredibly straightforward. Jesus uses the most basic stuff you can imagine, spit and dirt, to make a little bit of clay. He puts it on the man's eyes, gives him one simple instruction, and because the man just does what he's told, a miracle happens. Suddenly, he can see. Now you might be thinking, spit and clay, that's weird. But this seemingly strange method is actually building up to a much bigger idea. The speaker argues that how the miracle happened is just as important as the fact that it did. He calls this the principle of plainness. And here's the key takeaway. The fact that he uses something as common as spit and dirt, that's totally on purpose. It's basically a declaration that God's power doesn't need fancy, impressive tools. The instrument can be, as the speaker calls it, embarrassingly plain. And the speaker does a brilliant job of illustrating this point. He connects the dots from that simple spit and clay to a baby in a manger, to an uneducated farm boy, and even to a brand new, maybe slightly nervous missionary. All of them are these seemingly simple, unlikely vessels for a truly majestic message. Okay, so now the story takes a little turn. After this incredible miracle, the man gets hauled in for questioning by these skeptical religious leaders. And his response? Well, it introduces our next big theme, the undeniable evidence of your own experience. So, they're trying to trap him, trying to discredit Jesus by calling him a sinner. But the man who is healed, he's smart. He refuses to get dragged into their theological debate. He just falls back on the one thing they absolutely cannot argue with, his own reality. He's basically saying, look, I don't have all the answers, but I know this. My whole world has changed. Taking that powerful idea, that evidence from your own life, the speaker then applies it to a couple of doctrines that he presents as being really unique to his church. He sees them as more examples of the works of God made manifest. He gives us two big examples to chew on. First, this idea of priesthood authority, which he says isn't something you learn in a school, but something that's passed down directly in what's described as an unbroken line from Jesus Christ. And second, this concept of vicarious work for the dead, which is presented as this profound evidence of God's love for everyone, extending sacred rituals to those who've already passed on. And this is where it all comes together. The whole metaphor comes full circle and gets super personal. The speaker is finally ready to reveal his own spit and clay, that plain, unlikely instrument that he says healed his own spiritual blindness. And boom! There it is. This is the core connection of the entire message. For the man in the Bible, the tool for his healing was simple spit and clay. For the speaker, the tool that he says brought him spiritual sight was the Book of Mormon. Now, the speaker knows what people might think. He totally acknowledges that. Just like the spit and clay, the origin story of this book can seem unbelievable or even a little strange to critics. But he counters that by sticking to the simple explanation given for its creation, that it was translated by the gift and power of God. For him, the proof isn't in the origin story. It's in the effect it had on his life. And then, to really drive the point home, he brings his own life experience into it. He points out how the blind man's parents said, "Hey, he's old enough, ask him." Then the speaker says that now, at nearly 85 years old, after a long life, he too is of age and can speak for himself. He wraps it all up by tying his own personal testimony right back to that man from the Bible, using the powerful words of the famous hymn, Amazing Grace. It's his final, personal claim that his journey mirrors that ancient one. He's saying he was once spiritually lost and blind, but now, because of his own undeniable experience, he sees.